In 1964, a 10-year-old in rural America could wake up at dawn, eat a biscuit, and disappear into the countryside until the porch light came on at night, and nobody worried. No phone, no GPS, no plan. Today, that same freedom would get a parent a visit from the authorities. But here's the twist. Number 17 of this list was so normal that every kid in the county did it, yet now it is practically illegal. And number 3, most folks today have no idea children were ever trusted to do it alone. These were not reckless parents. This was an entire way of life built on trust, distance, and the belief that a kid who fell down learned to get back up. Let us begin our countdown of 25 country childhood freedoms from the 1960s that would be unthinkable now. Number 25. Riding in the open bed of a pickup truck. Saturday morning meant climbing over the tailgate and settling down against the wheel well, knees up, wind tearing at your hair as Dad drove the gravel road into town. There were no seat belts back there, no rules, just the rattle of the truck bed and the smell of dust and hay. Half a dozen cousins could pile in, legs dangling over the edge, waving at every car that passed. Going 4-0 down a county road felt like flying. The dog rode back there too, paws on the rail, tongue flapping. Nobody thought twice about it, because that was simply how country families moved. Today, a parent doing the same thing could be pulled over and fined, and most states have written it into law. The freedom of the open truck bed vanished, traded for booster seats and warning labels. Number 24. Drinking straight from the garden hose. On a hot July afternoon, when the sun baked the dirt yard hard as brick, a kid did not run inside for a glass of water. You grabbed the hose coiled by the spigot, let the first hot rush spill out onto your bare feet, then drank deep when it ran cold. The water tasted faintly of rubber and metal, warm at first, then shockingly cold, and it was the best thing in the world. You drank until your belly ached, then sprayed your brother and ran. Nobody checked the hose for lead or worried about what the rubber leached into the stream. It was just water, and you were just thirsty. Today, articles warn that those old hoses were never meant for drinking, and bottled water rides shotgun in every minivan. The simple act of bending to a hose has music quietly become a thing of the past. Number 23. Being handed a BB gun, or a .22 at 8 years old. In farm country, a rifle was a tool before it was anything else, and a boy or girl learned to handle one young. A Daisy BB gun under the Christmas tree was a rite of passage, and by 10 or 12, many kids carried a .22 into the back 40 to keep the crows off the corn. Fathers taught safety with a seriousness that bordered on religion, never pointed at the house, always check the chamber, treat every gun as loaded. Music. A kid would spend a whole afternoon plinking tin cans off a fence post, learning patience and aim. The responsibility was the point. Today the thought of an unsupervised 8-year-old walking a field with a rifle is unthinkable to most, and the cultural distance between then and now feels like 100 years rather than 60. Number 22. Vanishing into the woods until the dinner bell rang. The single greatest freedom of a country childhood was simple. You left. After chores you headed out across the pasture, into the tree line, down to the creek, and you stayed gone. There was no checking in, no text message, no agreed-upon meeting spot. The only rule was that you came home when you heard the dinner bell or your mother's voice carrying across the field at dusk. Kids built whole worlds out there, mapping every gully and fallen log, naming the deep parts of the creek. Hours passed with no adult within a mile. Mothers trusted the land to raise their children a little. Today that same absence would trigger panic and a search party within the hour. The leash on modern childhood has grown short, and the woods stand empty where they once swarmed with kids. Number 21. Riding bikes everywhere with bare heads and no helmets. A bicycle was a country kid's car, ticket, and freedom machine, all in one. You rode for miles on it, down dirt roads and across the highway shoulder, hair flying, no helmet, no pads, nothing but sneakers and nerve. Boys built ramps out of cinder blocks and plywood, and launched themselves into the air. Spills happened. Skinned knees and gravel-pucked palms were just the cost of the day, washed off under that same garden hose. Helmets did not exist in the rural imagination. The idea would have drawn laughter. A kid learned balance, speed, and consequence the hard way, and got music tougher for it. Today, a helmet is law in many places, and a bareheaded child on a bike draws disapproving music stares. The wild, untethered ride of childhood now comes wrapped in foam and chin straps. Number 20. Walking a mile or more to school alone in every kind of weather. Long before the school bus reached the back roads, country kids walked. Down the lane, across a field, along the shoulder of the county road, often a mile or two each way, sometimes more. In winter, you bundled up and trudged through snow that soaked your boots. In spring, you splashed through mud. You walked with siblings or neighbor kids, and the walk itself was a small society full of dares and arguments and shortcuts through somebody's pasture. No adult walked with you. No one tracked your progress. You simply arrived, cheeks red, and arrived home again. Today, the sight of the 6-year-old walking alone down a rural road would prompt phone calls and intervention, and the long solitary walk that built independence in a whole generation has been replaced by the worn safety of a car seat at the curb. Number 19. Swimming in the creek, pond, or swimming hole with no lifeguard in sight. When summer turned the air thick and the cicadas screamed, country kids headed for water. A bend in the creek where it ran deep, a farm pond ringed with cattails. A rope swing nodded to a sycamore branch. They stripped to cutoffs and jumped. Music. No lifeguard, no fence, no posted depth, just the muddy bottom and the cold shock of the water. Older kids watched younger ones, more or less, and everyone learned to swim by being thrown into the deep part and figuring it out. There were snapping turtles and snakes and slick rocks, and kids navigated all of it. The swimming hole was the social center of summer. Today, an unsupervised pond full of children would horrify by a modern parent, and liability has fenced off the very waters that once defined a country summer. Number 18. Building forts and tree houses with real tools and no supervision. A pile of scrap lumber behind the barn, a hammer, a coffee can of bent nails pulled from old boards, music, and a free afternoon were all a kid needed to start construction. Tree houses went up in the crook of an old oak, wobbly and ambitious, nailed together by hands too small to swing a hammer well. Kids climbed 20 feet up with boards under their arms. They used saws and hatchets, smashed their thumbs, and learning. The structures were rickety and gloriously dangerous, and they belonged entirely to the children who built them. No adult drew up a plan or checked the bracing. Today, the thought of unsupervised children high in a tree wielding hammers and handsaws would empty a room of parents, and the homemade fort has given way to the inspected, bolted, ground-level play set. Number 17. Lighting fireworks by hand on the 4th of July. Independence Day in the country. Music meant a paper bag full of firecrackers, bottle rockets, and Roman candles, and the kids ran the show. Boys held bottle rockets in their fists and let them scream off into the dusk. Firecrackers got lit and tossed, the fuses sparking down to nothing. Kids set Roman candles in beer bottles and aimed them across the field at one another, laughing and ducking. The smell of gunpowder hung in the warm night air, mingling with smoke from the grill. Fingers got singed, eyebrows got scorched, and it was all part of the holiday. No adult stood guard over a single fuse. Today, entire categories of these fireworks are illegal, and the child holding a lit one music would send a parent lunging. The hands-on chaos of a country 4th has become a roped-off professional display watched from a safe distance. Number 16. Driving the tractor and farm music equipment before reaching the teens. On a working farm, a child was labor, and labor meant machinery. By 10 or 11, many farm kids could drive the tractor, steering it down the rows, while the adults pitched hail bales up onto the wagon behind. They learned the clutch, the throttle, the feel of the big wheels' music, biting into soft ground. Kids drove pickups around the property and ran the equipment that the farm depended on. It was not a stunt. It was a contribution, and the responsibility made them proud. A 12-year-old who could plow a straight furrow held real standing in the family. Today, the idea of a grade schooler operating heavy machinery alone is unthinkable. Edged by age laws and safety regulations, the farm kid who once commanded a tractor at 11 hectares become a memory tucked music into old photographs. Number 15. Hunting and fishing alone. Gone before sunrise, back by supper. A country kid with a fishing pole or a shotgun did not need a chaperone. Before dawn, a boy might slip out with the dog, walk to the duck blind or the deer stand his father showed him, and sit alone in the cold dark waiting. Or he would take his cane pole to the creek and spend the whole day pulling up bluegill and catfish, cleaning them himself with a pocket knife on a flat rock. The skills passed down quietly, father to child, and then the child practiced them solo. Self-reliance was not a buzzword. It was breakfast. Today, the thought of a young child alone in the woods with a firearm, or wading a creek unsupervised, is enough to alarm most parents. The solitary dawn hunt that shaped generations of country kids has nearly disappeared. Number 14. Carrying a pocket knife to school and everywhere else. Nearly every country boy, and plenty of girls, carried a pocket knife by the age of 7 or 8. It rode in the front pocket of their jeans, pulled out to whittle a stick, cut a fishing line, peel an apple, or settle a game of mumbley-peg in the dirt at recess. The knife was a tool, not a weapon, and a kid who could keep his blade sharp and use it well earned quiet respect. Whittling away an afternoon on the porch steps, curling shavings onto the boards, was a country meditation. Teachers thought nothing of it. Today, a pocket knife in a child's possession at school means suspension and a report, and the everyday blade that once taught patience and care has been redefined as a threat. The casual trust placed in a child holding a knife now seems almost impossible. Number 13. Gathering around bonfires they helped build and tend. Come autumn, when the leaves piled deep and the brush needed clearing, country families lit bonfires, and the kids were right in the thick of it. They dragged branches, fed the flames, and poked at the embers with long sticks, faces glowing orange in the dark. Marshmallows blackened on coat hanger wire. Sparks spiraled up into the night sky. Pusic kids stood close enough to feel the heat tighten their cheeks, learning by instinct how near was too near. There was no fence around the fire, no adult assigned to crowd control. The fire was a gathering place, a teacher, and a thrill all at once. Music. Today, open burning is restricted or banned in many areas, and a child tending a roaring fire unsupervised would set off an alarm. The communal blaze that warmed so many country nights now flickers mostly in memory. Number 12. Riding horses bareback, across open country, no helmet, no fence. For ranch and farm kids, horses were transportation and companions both. A child might swing up bareback, no saddle, no helmet, gripping with bare legs and a fistful of mane, and ride for miles across the pasture and beyond. They learned to read the animal, to stay on through a sudden bolt, to fall and climb back up. Kids as young as 6 handled animals that outweighed them by 1,000 pounds. The trust ran both ways, child and music horse, and the freedom of the open ride was total. No one followed behind in a truck. Today, riding helmets, supervised lessons, and signed waivers govern the experience, music, and a small child galloping bareback and alone across open land would stop a modern parent's heart. The wild partnership of kid and horse has been carefully, sensibly fenced music in though. Number 11. Catching fireflies and staying out all after dark. When the sun went down and the heat finally broke, country kids did not go inside. They spilled out into the yard and the field with mason jars, chasing the blinking green lights that rose from the grass. Fireflies, lightning bugs, they filled the jars and held them up like lanterns, then let them go. The game stretched into full dark, kick the can, ghost in the graveyard, and hide and seek across acres of moonlit pasture. Kids knew the land well enough to run it blind. Parents sat on the porch and let the night belong to the children. There were no street lights, just stars. Today, the worry that something might happen after dark keeps children indoors, and the firefly-lit freedom of a summer music night, once the birthright of every country kid, has dimmed almost to nothing. Number 10. eating straight off the land with dirty hands and no second thought. A country kid's summer diet came partly from foraging. You pulled a carrot from the garden, wiped it on your jeans, and ate it dirt and all. You picked blackberries from the brambles along the fence until your fingers stained music purple, ate them warm off the vine, scratches and all. Wild plums, mulberries, sour green apples that gave you a stomach ache, keys, eaten raw from the pod, tomatoes warm from the sun, bitten into like apples, juice running down your wrist. No one washed anything. No one worried about pesticides or contamination. The garden and the hedgerow were a pantry, and the kids grazed all day long. Today, every berry gets rinsed and inspected, and the idea of a child eating unwashed produce from the dirt makes parents wince. The casual feast of the country summer has been sanitized away. Number 9. Climbing impossibly high into trees and barn rafters. Height held no fear for a country child. They climbed the tallest oak in the yard until the branches grew thin and swayed, sitting 40 feet up to survey the whole farm. They scaled the barn, walked the beams, swung from the rafters into the hay below. A kid measured himself by how high he could go, and the older children set the dares. Falls happened, and broken arms came back in casts that the whole school signed. But the climbing never stopped because the view from the top and the pride of the ascent were worth it. No adult spotted them or patted the ground. Today playground equipment is built low and soft, and a child 30 feet up a tree would send adults scrambling. The vertical freedom that once made the whole farm a climbing frame has come back down to earth. Number 8. Camping out overnight with no adults anywhere near. On a summer music night, a handful of kids might decide to sleep out, and that was that. They dragged blankets and a couple of canned goods down to the creek or the back pasture, built a little fire, and stayed out all night under the stars. No tent, sometimes just a music tarp, and the open sky. They told stories, spooked each other, listened to the coyotes and the owls, and fell asleep music on the hard ground. Morning found them stiff and dew-soaked and triumphant. There was no adult within shouting distance, and no way to call for one. The night belonged entirely to the children. Music and surviving it was the whole point. Today, the thought of unsupervised kids spending a night alone in the wild is unthinkable music to most families, and the overnight adventure that taught a generation self-sufficiency has all but ended. Number 7. Riding into town alone to spend a nickel on penny candy. A country kid with a coin in his pocket and a bike or a horse beneath him had the run of the nearest town. They rode in alone, parked outside the general store, and spent long minutes at the county counter agonizing over the choice. Penny candy, a bottle of pop sweating in the cooler, a comic book. The shopkeeper knew them by name, and knew their parents, and that web of familiar adults was the only supervision needed. Kids ran errands, picked up feed or a loaf of bread, and rode home. The whole transaction, the journey, and the trust made a child feel like a small citizen of the world. Today, sending a young child alone to town to handle money and traffic is nearly inconceivable, and the independent errand that once swelled a kid with pride has been folded back under a parent's watchful eye. Number 6. Sledding down music's steep hills and behind moving vehicles. Winter on the farm turned every slope into a runway. Kids piled onto wooden sleds and metal saucers music, and flew down hills that ended at fences, ponds, and roads, steering with their heels and praying. The boldest tied a sled to the back bumper of a pickup truck or a tractor and got towed across the snow-packed field at speeds that stole the breath, whipping side to side, hanging on with frozen fingers. Spills sent kids tumbling into the drifts laughing, then climbing the hill to do it again. No helmets, no padding, no second thoughts. The cold and the speed and the danger were the whole joy of it. Today, towing a child behind a vehicle would horrify any onlooker and likely draw the law, and the breakneck music sledding of a country winter has been smoothed down to the gentle slope of a public park. Number 5. Playing in the hayloft and meeping into the mow. The barn was the greatest playground a country kid could ask for. Music, and the hayloft was its crown. Kids climbed the ladder to the top of the mow, then jumped, falling 10 or 15 feet into the loose hay below, popping up itchy and grinning to climb and jump again. They built tunnels through the stacked bales, hid in the dusty dark, and music swung from ropes, thrown over the high beams. The loft smelled of dry grass and old wood, and the light music came down in dusty shafts. It was dangerous, of course. There were open hay chutes and hard floors and pitchforks. Music and kids navigated all of it. No adult oversaw the play. Today the hazards of a barn make it off-limits to children in the modern mind, and the joyful, reckless freedom music of the hayloft survives only in the stories of those who grew up climbing it. Number 4. Music disappearing down a dirt road for the whole day, completely out of reach. There was no way to find a country kid in 1965. Once they set off down the road. Music. Today, a few minutes of unreachable silence sets off alarm, and a child gone all day without contact is unthinkable. The deep, untracked freedom of those dirt roads is the thing we have lost most completely. Number 3. Handling the full work of the farm, livestock and all. Country children were not bystanders to the farm. They were part of it, hands-on from the time they could walk. Children fed and watered the hogs, gathered eggs from beneath the hens, led cattle to pasture, and helped at calving time in the cold of the barn. They mended fence, hauled feed, and worked alongside the animals that could kick, bite, and crush. A child learned the rhythms of life and the hard facts of a working farm up close, with real responsibility resting on small shoulders. The work was sometimes rough and always real, and it built a competence that no classroom could match. No adult shielded them from any of it. Today, child labor laws and modern sensibilities keep children far from the dangerous work of the farm, and the deep, capable involvement that once defined a country childhood has largely faded away. Number 2. Playing in and around dangerous farm structures unsupervised. The farm was full of places a child had no business being, and that is music exactly where children played. Grain bins, silos, manure pits, old wells, abandoned outbuildings, rusting machinery left in the weeds. Kids climbed a silo ladder to the top just to see the view. They explored the dark corners of the granary and clambered over equipment with blades and gears. The dangers were real and serious, and the kids treated them as a playground anyway, with only their own caution to protect them. They learned, often the hard way, what to respect and what to leave alone. No fence, no warning sign, no watching adult stood between a child and the hazard. Today, these are recognized as some of the most dangerous places a child can be, and the unsupervised ride of the farmstead is unthinkable to the modern parent. And finally, number 1. The complete and total freedom of an unwatched childhood. More than any single act on this list, the greatest country freedom of the 1960s was simply this. A child's day belonged to the child. From the moment chores were done until the porch light flicked on at dusk, the hours were theirs, unscheduled, unsupervised, unrecorded. No one mapped their movements, signed them up, or hovered at the edge of their play. They built their own worlds, settled their own arguments, took their own risks, and answered for their own scrapes and triumphs. The dinner bell ringing out across the field at dusk was the only string tying them to home, and it was a long, loose string. That trust, the willingness music to let a child simply be loose upon the land, shaped a generation of independent, music-resourceful adults. Today, childhood is scheduled, music tracked, and watched from dawn to dark. The wide open freedom that country kids once took for granted has become the most unthinkable thing of all. So, there they are. 25 country childhood freedoms from the 1960s that would never fly today. Which one took you back? Drop it in the comments. And if you lived any of these, tell us the story. Some things change for good reasons, but a few of these we sure do miss.